Hello, and welcome to our third class of astrology, June 11th, 2024. Today, we are going to be talking about conflict and finding harmony through conflict. Hey, we're going to look at the earth sign, which is not a typical thing you're going to find in astrology. Sometimes it's called the sister sign, and I'll show you on your chart. And we're going to focus on oppositions. At some point, I'm going to give you a little bit of theory first, but at some point when we look at each of your charts, I'm going to ask each of you to identify oppositions in your chart so you could visually get acclimated to what they look like, and then we'll go into describing what they mean for you in your particular chart. So I just want to take a moment to open the space, and I'm going to invite in, first week we invited in Mercury. Last week, we invited in Dionysus, and this month I want to invite in Eris. And she is the Greek goddess of conflict and discord. And it is through conflict that we discover our outer and inner harmony. So we want to invite her in. And I want you to keep an open mind in the areas of your chart that create the most conflict and discord in your life are the ones that are going to be with you until you cross over. In the area of your life, particularly one area, but sometimes we have several, where this discord and this conflict is for your greatest growth and your greatest harmony. So that's the lens in which we will discuss today, this idea of oppositions or discord or disharmony to find inner harmony. So here is our goddess today. Her name is Eris, and you can see she's got an apple in her hand. And she is the Greek goddess of discord and conflict. There was a royal wedding when she was not invited. And she was angry and she wanted to kind of stir up some chaos and conflict. So she took an apple and she threw it into the banquet hall. And the apple had a few words on it. Anybody want to guess from a very famous story what words might have been inscribed on the apple? Megan, you took up your volume, so I think you want to guess. No?
Like maybe Jen wanted to say something.
Oh. What fairy tale has an apple at the center of its strife?
Snow White.
Snow White. Snow White. And what did the Wicked Witch or the stepmother say in the mirror every morning?
Mirror, mirror on the wall. Who's the fairest?
Who is the fairest of them all? That comes from this myth. And so the imagery of Snow White eating the apple and falling and whatnot, it's strife and discord because she's innocent, right? She's the picture of innocence. The point in your chart that causes opposition, that causes discord, that causes disharmony is what appears to take your innocence, what appears to create in your life constant chaos, that you're unable to sort of be at peace or feel safe or have innocence that at one point perhaps you had as Snow White yourself. So it matures us into adulthood, spiritual adulthood. It matures us into growth, primarily seeking inner growth. So she throws this apple, according to the Greek myth. They pick up the apple and it says, to the fairest of them all. And of course, all of the women want to know who that means. So they go off and they create a contest, a beauty contest. And they call in several of the goddesses, Hera, Aphrodite, and Athena primarily. They go into the woods and they grab this guy named Paris and they say, Paris, decide who is the fairest of them all. Any idea who won? And more importantly, why? So Hera whispered in Paris's ear, being the queen of Olympus, she's like, I will give you anything you want. Athena, being the goddess of war, says, I will help you strategize to get whatever you want. And Aphrodite said nothing. She just opened her trench coat and showed her beautiful figure, and she won. So this idea of all's fair in love and war comes a little bit from that myth. And this idea of all's fair in love and war has to do with ourselves. In order to get to the ultimate self-love or love of another, we have to have that love for ourselves. Therefore, we have to accept the lack of innocence. We have to accept our lower consciousness. We have to accept that inner strife and discord that we don't like about ourselves that's reflected in others. And that's ultimately, it's with the oppositions in the chart that you achieve, if achievable, this idea of self-love and love of the other. So it's through war, the chart representation of oppositions is war, is discord. Externally, fights that you have with people, and of course, those that resemble the fights you have internally with your inner critic, your inner voices that cause you to feel less than. So when all of the parts in your chart are not in harmony and they're at war with one another, or they're not invited to the party, let's say that your selfishness isn't allowed or your manipulative nature isn't allowed, that creates discord in you, because really the point of the chart is to harmonize all of the aspects, these seemingly fragmented pieces, into integration. And the core thing of an opposition is to help you. So in esoteric astrology, there is something known as the 7 rays. The 4th ray is known as harmony through conflict. It's actually the ray that overrides the human race as of right now. So when we identify conflict as the means to become harmonized as a society, as an individual, as a humanity, this is the function of these oppositions. So a little theory and then we'll go into the practice. Oppositions are when 2 planets. I have houses here because you may or may not have planets in both of the houses. But if there is an opposition and something out of balance, we will compensate, and we'll see that when they're opposite one another. So the visual that you're going to look at is what in your chart looks like this. What is diagonal that is in an opposition? It's literally like head on, like the car is coming head on to you and you can see it. It's the greatest opportunity for growth in the lifetime. And its job is to help you harmonize and integrate this aspect of your chart. This is the purpose of your lifetime. Most people, we all have one, and that's what I'm going to show you with the earth sign with your sun. But if you have another, those will be the aspects that are most difficult. But the job of the lifetime is to work through these oppositions to create what we consider a third thing, a third force. It's the idea of alchemy, where you take these 2 opposing forces and you find that midpoint. So we're going to look at the oppositions in everyone's chart. And everybody has at least one. Everybody has at least the earth sign and their sun sign. So does everybody know the opposite of their sun? Patty, you're Gemini. Do you know what the opposite of your sun is? Sagittarius, yes. Carissa, also Gemini, Sagittarius. Megan and Jen, both Capricorn. What's your opposite?
Cancer.
Cancer. And Jen, you're a Sag. What's your opposite?
Gemini.
Gemini. Okay, perfect. And I'm a Pisces. My opposite is Virgo. First and foremost, the opposite sign of your sun is going to be your earth sign. This is for every single person. Okay? So this is going to be a karmic sign. It is going to be a sign that you encounter in life, oftentimes as something that creates chaos or conflict. A sign that you judge the most because it seems foreign to you. It seems like it's opposing you. They're exact opposite of what you are. Why would this be harmonious? And that sign should recur over and over and over again in your life to teach you and to show you and to identify your judgments about that sign, to show you that you are that. And in order for you to be a whole integrated being, that they represent, we'll go through a little cheat sheet momentarily, is what you need to integrate. And it's not like, oh, I have to integrate, emotion or a watery nature. And it's that easy, right? It's about really the opportunities in life that present you with challenges and conflicts so that you are forced into, if you will, integrating these aspects. So Jung said, the greater the contrast, the greater the potential. Great energy only comes from a correspondingly great tension of opposites. All of depth psychology, all of Jungian psychology can be summed up in 3 words: tension of opposites. When there's tension, when there's a judgment, when there's a conflict, when there's something that seems to be so opposing you, that is your greatest opportunity for growth. That is the opportunity for growth. All of depth psychology in those 3 words. Everything he studied, everything he wrote was about the tension of opposites. And because he was an astrologer and a metaphysician, it's the astrology aspect. That's why if you know anything about depth psychology and Jungian's theory, he talks about like extroversion, introversion. He's always comparing opposites because that's where there is most opportunity for growth. Questions so far? So we all have a Sun-Earth opposition. It's the same energy, but it's inverted. So I have some little cheat sheet words here. In our first class, we talked about the I statements. You can also use those I statements. For instance, I am for Aries, I balance for Libra. In order to balance, there has to be 2, right? So it's a we versus an I. So you can use those thematics as well. These are just other ways of doing it. Aries, Libra, and I'm going to specify in the chart how you can see this in various ways. War and peace, or the 1-7 houses, is the house of myself and others. I'm going to go through each of them in a moment, but the reason that I'm giving you both the houses and the signs is that you might have an opposition. I'm going to pick on Jen Miller for a second. In her 5-11, she has Saturn and a Jupiter. Not Jupiter, you have Saturn and Neptune. Her opposition is in the 5-11. So right there, that's one aspect of an opposition that she has, in addition to whatever Sun-Earth opposition she has. So each of you will see that. Not everybody has a second opposition to their Sun and their Earth, and that's fine. The Sun and the Earth is enough. But if you have multiple, those are going to add layers to the conflict. I have a Mars moon that has run my life. Megan, are you trying to talk? Because you seem like you're off mute, but I can't hear anything. Oh, okay. I just want to make sure you can hear me.
Can I ask a question?
Of course. Oh, hi. I didn't know you were there.
I
How are
didn't
you?
know you. Yeah, hi.
Hi.
Yeah, I was a couple of minutes late, so
No problem.
apologies. So I'm Leo Aquarius, but my Leo is in the 10th house, and opposite is the 4th rather than 5 and 11. Don't understand.
It might be because of the time zone you were born. When I bring up your chart in the practical, we'll look at it.
Okay.
Great question. It will appear as if it's opposite houses in that way because there's a form of astrology that is called equal houses, where each house is 30 degrees. But I don't use that for traditional astrology, just for ancestral. So when we bring up the chart, we'll look at it and see exactly where the opposition lies. Great question. Thank you. So Taurus, Scorpio, having, needing, wanting, that's the thematic. And the 2-8 is my resources and others' resources. So for instance, my Mars moon opposition is in the 2-8. So that's going to be resources. And then I have to layer on what the meaning of the moon and what the layer of Mars is. But the opposition houses will tell you where that person struggles with integrating that conflict, or where the conflict will play out in the life. Gemini, Sagittarius is student teacher. It's the 3-9 axis, low consciousness and high consciousness. In your astrology basics material, the 3rd house has to do, there's like a chart with all the meaning of the houses. The third house has to do with like K through 12. So it's things that we learn in lower school that's more generic knowledge. And then the ninth house is anything beyond high school, so college and above, and it correlates to higher consciousness. Cancer, Capricorn, private life versus public life. And it's that homework balance or that homework axis of 410. Leo, Aquarius, the fifth house has to do with the individuation process, whereas the 11th has to do with groups. So it's about myself versus society, or my place in society as my individual person. And then Virgo, Pisces is reality and imagination. 612, the earthly day-to-day mundane life is the sixth house, and the spiritual interconnected consciousness is the 12th house. So for just right now, knowing your sun and your earth, find which axis correlates to that. So Martin, you said Leo, Aquarius. So we're looking at 511. Jenny, you're going to be the 3-9. Jen and Megan, you're going to be the 410. Carissa's going to be the 3-9. And Patty, she's not on the screen for me right now, but is also the 3-9. So first, just look at your axis. Forget where your sun is. We're going to do layers. The first thing is by sign. So for instance, I'm a Pisces. It's going to be the 6-12. This is going to be an important axis in my chart, whether I have something there or not. It does not matter. That teaching is going to be relevant. That's the first thing. Now we're going to go to your each individual chart and find your sun earth placement. And then we're going to find if you have additional oppositions. But first, I want you to understand your axis of information. Does everyone understand that? So when you go to your materials and you study, even though I don't have anything in my 612, that's still an important axis because I need to learn all about Virgo and all about Pisces so I can understand myself fully. Then I'm going to go to where my sun earth axis is and then to any opposition. So we'll do that for each of you. But it's important that you understand the other sign and the other house of your axis so that you have the complete picture of how you're supposed to move in the world. So Jung said, to begin to have a presentiment of the whole is you, your entirety as a person, when you embrace your opposite principle, since the whole belongs to both principles which grow from one root. So have you ever heard that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree? We talked about Eris and Snow White, the apple. Everything that is in your parents, your root tree is in you, right? You're the fruit to that root. And so everything of conflict that's outside of you is strife that is inside of you. Same idea. That's where judgments are confessions, and they're great, and the mirroring and the projection concept comes from. Any questions about that? So I mentioned this already. Any houses or signs that are opposing have the same idea. So the 6-12, the 4-10, wherever you have an opposition or one house is heavier than the other, there's going to be an imbalance and there's going to be conflict in those areas. If a house is top heavy, I'll pick on Jen again, just because I know her chart. The 11th house is packed with stuff, but her 5th house only has one planet in it. So it's a little top heavy. The client's going to find strife in that other area of life to try to balance it. So that's another way that the oppositions work. If a union is to take place between opposites, spirit and matter, conscious and unconscious, bright and dark, and so on, it will happen in a third thing, which represents not a compromise, but something new. So for those of you who know a little bit about my work, when I talk about 0 to 100, it comes from this idea of tension of opposites, these extremes. The concept of 48 to 52, which is the midpoint or the yin-yang, that midpoint of the yin-yang, or the Tao, which is the middle path, all of the philosophies speak about a middle way. It is not that you're all of one and none of the other, or all of one and none of that other. but it is a brand new thing that you create from both extremes. This is the idea of your parents. Your parents are the two extremes, and you are the thing that emerged from that, your own identity, your own life, your own choices, your own decisions. And so this is why we keep going back to that root. We keep going back to our parents. We keep going back to the sun and the moon to identify what's trying to come out original, that's ours, as a new thing that emerges from the opposites. So here's a sample chart. We're going to look at everyone's chart in a moment. But I first want to show you this symbol here. It's green. It's a circle with a cross in it. This is the symbol of Earth. You see that? Everybody has this. It is always directly across from your sun. It's the one opposition every single person has. So that's going to be the first thing that you're going to look for. Then you're going to look by sign. This person is a Cancer. So Cancer is the 4-10 axis. There's going to have to be some balancing of energy between home life and work life, private life and public life. So that's going to be one thematic. The Earth in Capricorn and the Sun in Cancer is going to talk about the same thing, but now we're looking at the 6-12. They have to bring this out to the material world and the spiritual world. Their daily life schedule versus their more spiritual interconnectedness inner world. And then if there's any other opposition, which this person does have, it's this Pluto-Venus, then we would layer and find out what that is as well. But the primary two are the houses that correlate with your sign and your opposite sign, and then your sun and your earth. Is that clear before we move into the practice? Yes? Okay. So let me bring up the charts. Jen, can you see this? It's showing your chart?
It's showing Martin, or now it's showing mine, yeah.
It's yours? Okay, perfect. So let's start with you. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to see that Jen's earth sign is Cancer. It's in the 7th house. And her sun is in Capricorn in the 1st. So what is the meaning of the 1-7? Do you remember?
Hold on, I wrote it down. Myself and others.
Right, it's the me and the we. It's myself as an individual versus the collective of friends or the couple, right? So a big theme in this chart, in this lifetime, has to be, if the sun is in the 1, the earth is going to be in the 7, and that axis is crucial. Is going to be about trying to balance an entire lifetime between what relevance am I versus what relevance am I in the relationship. 7th house is the first marriage, right? You're married 20 some years. There's a thematic there. That's going to be that main point of discord or inner sort of growth, is how you live out the strife in the 1-7. Myself as an individual, my best friends, my husband, my closest relationships. Do I put them first? Do I put myself first? That's one layer that's going to be relevant throughout life. Let's talk a little bit about the sign of Cancer. So you're a Capricorn. It's duty. It's a public image. It's about responsibility, limitation, structure. And here your earth sign is saying, forget all that. See everything in the world from the 7th house perspective and from a Cancerian perspective. How does that make you feel? That you have to think about others, 7th house, and emotional, sort of needy, wateriness. That's the invitation of the chart. To know yourself better as the sun, you need to see this Cancer in the 7 from others' perspective to understand yourself better. Speak to that for a second, how you've lived that or how that feels to you.
Well, I'm very disparaging about water signs because I have no water in my chart, but obviously that's talking about something about myself. I definitely live that out. I do put a lot of emphasis and focus on others and put them before myself. You know, I do try to like overachieve mothering, overachieve my relationships in a way, in that Capricorn way. So that must be the combination of the two.
So that's the lived experience of water signs, or mothering is, or relationships are, right? Fill in the word with some word of disharmony or discord or strife or difficulty, right? Because the earth sign invites you to look at by sign and by house. That's completely opposite than your natural state, which is you in the first house. Me at the center, at the forefront, first house. The chart says, no, look at everything from an emotional standpoint, from the other's point of view. We're never going to like our earth placement by sign or by house, because it contradicts everything that we stand for or we think we stand for. But it's the only way to integrate the opposites is from standing and looking at the world in that spot. So that's the first thing. Similarly, Cancer and Capricorn are the 4-10 axis. Now, Jen's 4-10 axis is empty, but because the chart is saying Cancer, Capricorn, not just the first house and the seventh, you and the other. Now bring that to your home work balance. What has been your struggle about you and the other and the work-life balance that you've experienced?
Well, I have a lot of children, and I always try to overthink how I parent them all very differently, including I think I apply like my type A work self to how I parent and how I nurture.
Okay. So that's where you
And
see a
definitely
conflict, perhaps, right? Where you're trying to bring your Capricornian, your work self that works at work, right? Your structure, your responsibility, your limits, your rules, to a home environment, when over here it's saying, don't do that. Let the other dictate. Let the other tell you what they need, right? And then the third, just to kind of tie it up together, is Jen's 11th house is very top heavy. So here's the Neptune I talked about earlier, her Venus, her moon. I mean, all of this is opposite her Saturn. He's going to try to overdo to come out of that imbalance of the 11th house and bring more energy to her 5th. So all of this service or group oriented nature, you're trying to bring either to yourself and or your children. So what is the theme? In all three times, in all three spaces, whether it's the opposition to the sun, whether it's the top heavy opposition of the 5-11, or it's the 4-10 axis, there's a theme about work and home, others and others in relationship, the group and myself. It's the same thematic. So that's the theme of the lifetime that needs to be integrated. Finding that midpoint through all of these conflicts that are afforded you, to find a midpoint of, wait a minute, how do I balance both my work life, my home life, my relationship and myself, my children and others? I'm not left out of the equation, but neither is anybody else. You can see how we need a lifetime, if that, to figure it out. Any questions?
Yeah. No, I'm working on these things. You know, I'm working on these things.
Okay, Jenny. Okay, so your sun is in Sag in the 7th, and your Earth is in Gemini in the 1st. So again, this idea of myself and others. But this chart says, look at her 7th house is filled with the ease of other people. And this chart is telling you, think about yourself, position yourself first. Logic, it's in Gemini. Myself, how does this affect me? What is my decision, my rational choice, decision-making process as I interact with other people? So it's asking you to look at the version of you that interacts with others? How do you bring logic to a situation? So my question to you is, do you tend to consider yourself with a seventh house sun? Probably not. And I'm talking younger years, but do you tend to consider yourself nurse? Just by the profession, you can tell the answer. Do you tend to consider yourself when you're making a choice, when you're making a decision? Or are you the last person on your list to consider?
I've probably most of my life been the last person on the list to consider. Yes.
So the incongruity of the sun, we talked about in our first class. The sun does not like the seventh house because the sun likes to be bright, be individual, and it's a group, it's in a house of collective, of the other. So it already wants to please the others and shine not too bright with others. And so now the earth confirms that and says, no, 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 no. In order for you to shine brightest for others, you have to consider yourself first. So it's opposite the meaning. And for a seventh house sun, it's going to be difficult to consider themselves first, right? So Jen, you were in the first and your earth were in the seventh, and it has to be flipped. So what house is the Sag Gemini axis?
Teacher student.
Teacher student, the 3-9.
Yeah.
So here we see another confirmation of the message. In the 3-9, she has the nodes. She has to leave behind the past, the emotionality, the sentimentality. And she has to take on the south node of Capricorn. More duty, more this is the way, a little bit, I'm just going to say harsh in the sense that I have to think of myself. I've got to, figure out what needs to be done. And so the chart is leading her first to her, first to her, first to her. When I find myself, when I understand myself, when I shine as myself, then others can lead, but not prior. And so the North Node is a road that's to the future, and it's to lead other people. It's the house of the teacher, but you cannot be the teacher yet until you're fully understanding all of your aspects, right? That's when you can then lead the road for others. Now, does anyone see any oppositions visually? Just look at the chart visually. Does anything stand out that is opposing that we haven't already mentioned? No?
Is there like a Taurus 12th house and 6th house going on?
Yes. So she's got this opposition. It's not an exact opposition, and you'll see in your materials, there's something called an orb, and the degrees will determine how much of an impact the opposition has. This is a mild one, but we're just using visually, so you could see that there's a thematic there. So there's an opposition in the 6th to the 12th house. So there's already a difficulty with practicality versus spirituality. And I think you told us last month that your mom was not very practical, that she lived kind of, is that what you told us?
Well,
your mom was,
she was an artist. Yes.
she was an artist. Okay, so she was artist.
Through her
Okay.
art, the world that she
So here's mom in this world of spirit, in this world of art, in this world of everything's connected. And here is Saturn. That could be authority, that could be work, that could be a father figure. There's an opposition internally of how much do I give a practical life and how much do I give this spiritual life? How much do I give rigid rules to how much do I just kind of feel my way through? How have you lived that?
I think I've lived that. Yes,
Okay.
I do actually just kind of feel my way through. Yes.
Okay. And that's very Sagittarius, right? Sagittarius is kind of feeling the experience and stuff. But again, I take you back to the earth.
Yes.
The earth says choice, rational, logical. Your North Node in Capricorn says logical, rational, responsible. So what you're trying to balance here is not only myself and the other, but how much do I lend to practicality and rules and structure, and how much of me is a little more intuitive and And kind of, I touched a nerve. I spoke to something.
Oh, okay, yeah, got that.
So that's the sort of midpoint, that third thing in the chart for you to become whole.
Yes.
The thing with discord, the thing with conflict is that it's supposed to teach us more about our decision-making skills, how we choose, how we're choosing, who we're choosing for, what values are we choosing based on. This isn't a script. It's a situation by situation. So that's why oppositions are continually showing where person is going to get confronted with this. It seems like the same situation comes round and round and round because it's supposed to. It's to show you that hundreds of opportunities to choose and you never really are quite sure which you're going to choose. Or if you keep choosing the other one, you now have to try the other side of it. And that's the function of this, to realize that there's no right or wrong. There's no real scripted answer.
So
Okay.
Okay,
Megan. So Megan, to the eye, and I know that you've been studying your chart, but first thing you see that's in an opposition, boom, hit
And then moon.
the sun and the moon. When the sun and the moon are in
It's
opposition,
really difficult.
it's not the exact opposition because there's the sun's at 27 and the moon's at 12, but you could see visually, and it also brings in the Neptune here and the Uranus and the Mercury. Like there's a lot of opposing the moon. If the moon is being pummeled with all of these planets, conflict after conflict after conflict, there's something here that's trying to soften your nature. There's something that's trying to break the moon out of you, right? The mother, the emotion, the woman out of you. When so much opposition to a planet. I have a similar thing. And so that's going to be a feeling of being pummeled consistently around your moon. Your moon is constantly under attack, if you will. That's one of the first things that stands out. You've got all of this Capricorn stellium, and this poor little moon is there trying to defend itself. It's going to have to find many versions of itself in order to survive all of that sort of attack, right? So maybe you're like the crab and you put on armor, right? Maybe you run and you find a new house. You start to realize that this moon becomes very, very resourceful. And you realize that you're more Cancerian and more emotional and maybe more dependent than you ever thought you were. Dependency for the Capricorn is an evil word. But what if your dependency can give you safety? What if your dependency can give you, some refuge or respite? What if it's the equivalent of finding a new shell? And so all of this responsibility and duty from Capricorn that's saying, nope, give me a new version of your moon. Nope, show me how you are, fill in the blank Cancerian, moon-like, changing faces, is forcing you to find that inner moon that you're somewhat resisting discovering and exploring. Mm-hmm. It's in the 5-11. Now you see her sun is at the cusp right here of the 6 and the 5, what Martin was asking about earlier. When something is at the cusp, it's as if it's in both houses. Because the moon is in the 11th, we look at it as the 5-11, but it does have a little bit of 6-12 too. So the 5-11 is me and the group. So maybe you learn more of your femininity, your changing faces, your moods, your dependency, all Cancer words, in a group setting. And you maintain more of your individuation in the 5th house, in your entrepreneurial nature. It's also in the 6th, so your work experience or your more rational self is left to work. But your more emotional nature may be amongst groups and amongst friends. So that could be a way to start balancing that. We talked about this in our first class. The sun is the rational nature and the moon is the emotional. If there is a conflict between am I rational or emotional, logical or emotional, you're going to be consistently afforded the option to choose which one. Is this appropriate situation for a rational choice? Or is this the appropriate situation for an emotional dependency? There's no right or wrong answer, but the world is going to provide you with the choice of both so that you could decide what's best for you and which aspect of yourself wants to be highlighted. Your Earth is also in Cancer. So it adds another layer to the difficulty of working with this moon that's being slaughtered, right, by all of this Capricorn. Because the Earth sign is in Cancer and it's in the 12th. Already we want to hide our Earth sign. The last thing you want to appear as is is Cancer. And now on top of that, it's at the bottom of the ocean. So that's one of the reasons why the conflicts have to come at you about emotion and neediness and dependency in your home and children and food and nurturance. It has to. It's the only way it's going to bring this out of the ocean for you to look at it and go, oh, I am Cancerian. In order to know myself wholly as a Capricorn, I must own all of my Cancer traits. This is in the 6-12. Another confrontation that you'll have is what is reality and what is fantasy. And you're a dreamer. Like she's a dreamer, like she dreams at night. I don't mean like a dreamer like me. She's a dreamer in Astrology. She goes to sleep and she dreams vividly. And that is one of the ways that an Earth or anything in the 12th, Jenny, you might dream as well with that moon in the 12th. Jen, you have Mercury in the 12th. Like any placement in the 12th is going to bring some sort of psychic information in the dream state. But to have an Earth in the 12th, you're going to be confronted with the question, did I just experience that? Was that real? Is this reality? Is that fantasy? And that's part of the function of this, is that Cancer doesn't really identify the difference between an inner world and an outer world. Pisces, water signs, we don't identify a difference. And that's part of what conflict is. As within, so without. That's one of the reasons why that Earth sign in Cancer in the 12th in the dream is to make you realize there is no difference. If I dream it, it is real. So that's one of the functions of that. Okay. Martin. Okay, so Martin, your sun is in the 9th and your Earth is in the 3rd. So the 9th house and the 3rd house, we're dealing with a Leo and an Aquarius. I think that's what you were talking about. The Leo Aquarius axis is the 5-11. So even though like Jen, the axis of 410 in Jen and the axis in 5-11 in your house is in your chart is empty, there's still an emphasis there. The question of the opposition, of the conflict, of the disharmony in myself is how often am I acting in a high consciousness way? And how often am I in a lower consciousness way? How often am I the teacher? How often am I the student? This question and answer, that inner dialogue has to be found here. The student teacher is the 3-9, the high consciousness, low consciousness is the 3-9. But the 5-11 has to do with when am I my authentic, individuated self? And when do I kind of dim that, Leo, never, right? To allow the group light to shine, the Aquarius. When does my individuation harm humanity, 11th house? When does my individuation serve humanity, 11th house? So that's how we layer on the axis, the signs, and the houses. Do you have questions about that particular thing in your chart before I continue?
I'm not quite sure why the sun and the earth are not in the 11th and the 5th based upon what you showed on the previous slide.
Oh, that's the proper placement of Leo and Aquarius. The owner of the 5th house is Leo, and the owner of the 11th house is Aquarius. However, based on your birth information, your sun is in the 9th and your Earth is in the 3rd. So what you do is layer the meanings.
Okay.
So the 5-11, which is individuation or self to service of the group, you bring that meaning onto your 9-3. So that's why I was saying, when you teach versus when you're a student, when do you serve yourself? When do you serve the group? Those are going to be questions of the lifetime. When do you use, this is an important one, especially for Leo. When do you use your high consciousness choices versus your low consciousness. This is one of the incongruities of your chart. You're a ninth house sun in Leo. The ninth house is higher consciousness, spiritual teacher, spiritual evolution, expanded consciousness. But Leo is a very self-serving sign. That means I have to own my selfishness, my self-serving lower nature, rightfully so, in order to be the best teacher I could be. But if I never want to own my lower consciousness because that's wrong or whatever, right? Then you cannot serve humanity. And so you have to realize, this is the teaching of the lifetime, that your earth is in Aquarius in the low consciousness house. You must understand that you are human first. You are like everybody else first. Every situation is to bring you back to earth and reality. When you realize nothing's personal, it's all universal, this is just a human experience, then and only then do you become the teacher, and I say that capital because it's Leo, that you're here to do. That's how you serve humanity, but it's not short of understanding that you are human and experience everything like humans do. That's the teaching of the lifetime there.
Awesome.
Any oppositions that you're identifying, just visually, that you see are opposite? Even if you don't know the name of the planets, you can
Yeah,
just tell
I
me
don't
what
know the
number.
name, but all of those in the 10th and with the 4th.
Okay, so the 10th house is the private life. I mean, the public life, the work life, right? Professionalism and having some sort of persona of a vocation or a profession. And the 4th is a home life. So there's an opposition here with Chiron to Uranus and Jupiter. Now, you don't know this, but I'm going to tell you. Uranus and Jupiter are sky gods. And so it goes along with this idea of I'm God-like. Leo is the god Apollo. So you're here with your godlike nature, right? Zeus, Apollo, these big names in Greek mythology. I have to live as a god, but here is this lady named Frances telling me, live like a human. That's gonna be a difficulty to understand and to integrate because there's so much godlike essence. It's all at the top of the chart. You're sitting at the throne of Olympus, and here I am saying, no, come to earth. And so is this. This is Chiron in Aries. I have the exact same placement in the exact same sign. This is who the hell am I? So if I can't be a god and I don't want to be a human, the lifetime is about discovering what's my midpoint of divine and human. And that goes back to the 9-3. Am I the student? Am I the teacher? I would recommend for you to read about this guy. His name is Chiron. And he was the teacher to the gods. He's going to maybe help you discover a little bit about who you are and how you find that space between the divine and the human that you might be struggling to discover. Also, in the seven gates, I think you have my book. There's a whole chapter on Chiron in there called Finding Your Divinity Through Your Humanity. I would recommend you read that section. Carissa. Okay, Carissa's whole chart is one big opposition. Look at this. Everything's opposing, right? So my question to you is, do you ever feel cut in half? Do you ever feel like two separate individual people, that you're either on one side of the war or one side of the offense and the other defense? Do you feel yourself flip-flopping in positions and scenarios and situations in your lived experience?
I live that way every single day.
Okay. So can you give
That's my whole life.
Okay. Can you give me just one experience, short and sweet, a sentence or two, of a lived experience where you've taken one side and then you flop to the other, or vice versa?
I guess like the responsibility, irresponsibility pendulum has been my big one lately.
Okay. So responsibility, irresponsibility, Capricorn.
Do you want like a
No, that's a good one. I'm just saying so that you could draw a line for yourself. Most of the things in your chart, just by visually looking at it, everyone can see this. This seems to be all empty. This seems to be all empty. She literally is fighting between her value system and whether it's her or the other. That's literally your entire lifetime right there in those four houses, that axis, right? So if the continuum is responsibility to irresponsibility, I would recommend see which is the responsible parent, for instance, versus the irresponsible one. Maybe that helps you to get some concrete sort of root concepts and values and behaviors from your parents, and seeing where you can meet yourself in the middle, or find somebody in your life or in the media or on a TV show that's supremely irresponsible and someone who's supremely responsible, and start identifying where you can start to define a midpoint of those. The 0 to 100 work, those pendulum swings, that law of polarity for you is going to be crucial. It is literally your lifetime is to find the midpoint of the two extremes in each situation over and over and over. It's going to get exhausting, but it's actually what your lifetime is about. So the sun is in Gemini in the 7th house. So similar to Jenny, your sun is in the house of an individual, right? Gemini. It has a twin nature because of obviously the mythology of twins of Gemini, but it's really about the entirety of oneself, the light and the shadow self. But as long as you're hiding amongst others, you don't get to shine. But that also means you don't get to look at your shadow. Okay. And so your earth is in the 1st house and it's in Sagittarius. So you might put yourself first, but it could be in an escaping kind of way. It could be that, oh, I'm going to put myself out there, but it's really wink, wink, because I want to hide. Because it's in that seeker Sagittarian escapist way. So the point of the life here is to stand in yourself, situate yourself in your 1st house. You, what do I want? What's the light and shadow of all of it, right? In a Geminian sort of sense. And then make the choice. Then put yourself out there to the others. But this 1-7, pretending I'm serving another, but really it's me, but really I'm serving myself by escaping to another. There's some of that nonsense happening there. Now,
Yeah.
Gemini Sag, like Martin, is the 3-9 axis. So it's about student teacher. It's about low consciousness, high consciousness. And Gemini, just by virtue of being Gemini, you must look at your shadow nature. Anything we have in Gemini is the sign of the age of Aquarius. Mercury is the planet of the age of Aquarius. We are all going to be confronted with our shadows for the rest of our existence. This is what's moving into the world. So without you looking at your shadow, you're not going to ever fully know yourself whole. But second, 29 degrees of a sun is what we call a critical degree. You would have been born minutes or hours later, and you're another sign. That 29 degrees is a very, very critical degree. That means that you are kind of on the precipice of me or them, my own identity or their identity, and that is shown in the chart. That's why you flip flop and swing and have these extremes. This is a very, very crucial teaching in this lifetime, is to figure out not only who am I, but really making that choice, that knowing all of the aspects of yourself. This is where you're standing. You're standing in your light by owning your shadow. Look at all the Cancer that precedes her. It's dimming. It's dimming. And it's literally, if I check the chart, it would be hours later, she would be a Cancer. So the psyche doesn't know, am I Cancer, am I collective, or am I Gemini? And I'm just going to share this with you. The Gemini myth is Castor and Pollux. And every Gemini myth, every myth of twins, one twin is divine, one twin is human. There is a divine light that grows. This is in the Gospel of Thomas, or an earthly light that dims. If you don't make that decision for you, the collective Cancer is all about dimming light. There is not one bright light in the constellation of Cancer. So if you don't make your light bright, no one's going to do it. It's going to be like crabs in a pot dragging you down. Time to light. What's that song? Shine bright like a diamond. Patty. Is she on?
No.
I can't see her on my list, so I'm just going to speak assuming she's here. So Patty is similar to Carissa, Gemini, Sag, but she's a 410. The axis question is going to be, how much energy do I put in my work life, my outside of the home life versus my home life? So I have to, the earth sign, this is a symbol, this is a glyph of the earth. Anywhere you see this in any symbology book, this cross with the circle is the symbol for earth. The circle of spirit with the cross of matter. Wherever you have that in the chart, any person, that person has to saturate every single version of that experience by house, by sign, to know that part of themselves so well that they can fully shine as the sun, the opposite sign in that house. That is the function of the earth. So Patty has to understand the fourth house is all about her home life, her home, her children, building homes, her inner home, everything to do with emotional dependency, decorating homes, everything that has to do with the crab shell, the emotional neediness, all of it. So it has to do with the moon, it has to do with Cancer, it has to do with the physical home, it has to do with the parents. In order to fully understand her Geminian self, both the light and the shadow aspect, and be the teacher, be the person that comes to like live as like a queen, or to live out the 10th house placement of taking her throne, taking her place in the world, liberating herself. The 10th house is also the house of emancipation and liberation. She must understand every single thing about being a Sagittarius in the fourth house. The problem with Sagittarius in the fourth house, if Sagittarius is a sign of expansion and the fourth house is a house of limitation, everything according to the home, the children, the spouse, the construction, the shell, the emotions is gonna feel resisting. I'm stuck. I feel like I'm shackled. So there has to be hundreds of examples. And this is lived daily, to feel I've tried out the gamut of everything about Sagittarius in the fourth, how I feel expansion through restriction, and restriction is expansion, that concept, in order to really fully be free and liberated by the thoughts, Gemini. Yeah, I have yours, you're next. In the 10th house. So that's supremely important. So if you go back to the meaning of what Sagittarius and Gemini is, and you layer that on the home work tends to be the expansive place. Work tends to be where you have groups of people, where you meet people from other walks of life. But it's not there. It has to be in the home. It has to be the friction of restriction, not feeling expansive, that's going to force you to break out of those chains in order to become fully emancipated and free the way you want to be. That's first. Any questions about that? I see you now. I didn't see you before. Any other oppositions that we're picking up on her chart?
Yes, the ninth and the second house. Taurus and
the Taurus and the Scorpio. Here it is this Chiron and Uranus. Same thematic. Chiron is orphan, rejected, wounded, not accepted. And Uranus is liberty, freedom. Your chart in both places, by this opposition, liberate yourself with whatever restricts you, which is our wound, and liberate yourself here through liberating your thoughts is the thematic of the chart. You hold yourself to a very restrictive nature, a very restrictive sort of box. Every time you're able to break out of that, whether it's Uranus, Chiron, or Gemini, Sag, sort of reversed, if you will, that's how you're going to be liberated and free. But those conflicts are the ones that are going to come to force you to find a way out, to find a new road, to find a new thing to do. but you must feel uber restricted in order to find the expansion and the liberation that you're really here to seek and have. And Uranus in the third, just so you know, Uranus in the third is the most liberated mind there is. But oftentimes it's lived as anxiety, ADD, OCD, panic. But really, Uranus in the third is the capacity to be the most liberated mind there is. And here's Gemini in the house of emancipation, which is thoughts. Liberate your thoughts, liberate your life. You're really not shackled, but you feel like you're shackled because of your thoughts. Sophia. Okay, so Sophia is Libra, Aries, Sun in the 12th, and Earth in Aries in the 6th. So one of the main thematics here is, it goes back to what Jenny had, and Megan, what is real, what is fantasy, what is real, practical, 3D, I can touch, it's here, it's in existence, versus what I'm making up in my head. There's that thing. The 6-12.
Yeah, I'm realizing that I'm the most delusional person I've ever met in my life. I constantly live in a state of delusion.
Well, Sun and Moon in the 12, I think you might have had some delusional parents at some point in your conception story, just saying.
Yeah, thanks.
So there's a lot of delusion. There's a lot, what we talked about last time, sort of like the mental institutions, things that are, hidden secrets that are bottom of the ocean. So when there's so much at the bottom of the ocean, we don't necessarily know how to distinguish between reality and fantasy, right? If a gold coin and a dead body is, swimming by you, and you don't know what you're looking at, there's a lot of questioning. Is this real? Is this really happening? Do I really experience this? So there's a very, very, very big need for conflict. Why? Aries is a sign of war. You need to feel, it's like you have to feel the bullet. You have to feel the fight. That can make you want to work out, right? Like you feel the muscle, you feel the war, the tension, or the conflict in the 5 senses. You're going to need a physical, practical reality to say, oh, I'm here. This is real. Like this is something that's actually tangible and practical. So the delusion comes from, I need to have a lived experience to know that this is real. Not an imaginary experience, not seeing it on TV that someone tells me about it, but that I live it. And so the earth is telling you, walk the walk, be in the world, plant the seed, try out the drink, tell the person you're mad, go to war in the earthly world. This is like the Bhagavad Gita, right? The war is in your mind, but you have to kind of go, you have to go fight in order to have inner peace. That was what on the slide, war and peace. In order to have this harmony, in order to have the interconnectedness of it all, you have to know firsthand, boots on the ground, what is real to you and what is not. You cannot have a third person's perspective. You have to live it. That's crucial. That's in the 6-12. So Libra Aries takes us back to the 1-7. And again, it's me versus the other. Is my experience mine? Or did that person just tell me and I took it as mine? Sun and Moon in the 12th, I'm going to assume and assimilate that everything I see and hear and watch is mine. And so I need, again, a reality check. It's constantly going to be reality, so that you don't get stuck in that fantasy or that delusion or that interconnectedness, that drowning at the bottom of the ocean. You have to get up, try it, taste it, touch it, and then you can say, that's been my lived experience. That is very key in this one. And then you have, it's a little far, but it's only at 0 degrees, this Gemini, or this Venus Saturn. This could be fantasy, love, right? If it's the goddess of love, what is reality? What is fantasy? And then Saturn is reality. So you see, again, it's a far away opposition. It's not super opposing the degrees, but it gives another taste and another flavor that this person lives between a reality and a fantasy. And Mercury next to Venus can be some fantasy because Mercury can maybe make you think, especially because it's Libra. It can make up like images in the head. It can invent things around love, around your own identity, first house, maybe seeing yourself as you're not. So you constantly need to check in with a reality to say, oh no, this is real. And by real, I'm just saying four, like here, 4 elements, practical. Questions? Did I get everybody?
Yeah, pretty accurate. That was good.
Okay. So I just want to take a moment to close up. Thank you, Eris, for teaching us about the importance of harmony through our discord, through our conflict, recognizing that we, each of us individually, is the fairest of them all, that the brighter that we shine, the brighter we can move humanity along and let others shine. And just a shout out to Dionysus, the twice born, who allows us to look at our chart from a low consciousness, thinking that these are conflicts that are being done to us. But as we rebirth ourselves, we realize they're done for us. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay. I'll see you guys next month.
Francis,
Yes.
can you end the recording and stay there for